My fusion system, fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapter 331, Dabble in everything. That is a blessing from the gods? You are a platinum tier mage and a platinum tier priest. The mermaids felt the divine light on their bodies, and they looked incredulous. Let's not talk about that for now. Let's go. Watson did not explain further and walked straight out. The mermaids looked at each other in dismay. Their bodies were extremely weak due to being trapped in the water tank and fighting with the people on that ship. However, that their strength had recovered to its optimum, they were unafraid of confronting the few gold-tier warriors aboard that ship head-on. That gave them confidence as they dragged the little mermaid along with them. The ground could no longer support them as the water from the tank had spilled all over it. Their fishtails projected an optical light as they moved, gradually transforming into two smooth thighs covered by a layer of gauze-like long skirts that concealed their private parts. At that moment, they believed that Watson was there to save them. If Watson had not wanted to help them, he could have subdued them easily with his strength as a platinum-tier dual-class warrior. The meat of those girls is quite fragrant. I wonder if the mermaids will eat their food now. They haven't touched the food we sent them 2 days ago. If they don't eat it now, we won't be able to sell them for a good price. Young Master Casey will be furious. As Watson and the others came out of the cabin, 2 crew members who had just passed by Watson walked out of what appeared to be a kitchen. They were holding a plate of golden-colored fried meat with a delicious aroma. The 2 groups of people collided in the cramped cabin. Both groups were taken aback. Who are you? And aren't those the mermaids from the water tank? Despicable thief! You let out the goods that young Master Casey had caught with great difficulty? You're courting death. The 2 crew members were the first to react. It would be their responsibility as the person in charge of the cabin if anything happened to the mermaids. If those mermaids had fled, they would be severely punished. They were aware of young Master Casey's techniques. One of them kept his hold on the tray while the other dashed toward Watson. A powerful aura unique to gold-tier warriors burst forth from his body. Gold-tier combat technique, wave-treading mountain-crushing strike. A flood of water elemental combat aura surrounded the gold-tier warrior. It created a wave beneath his feet, and with every step he took, a puddle of water appeared on the ground. His body also teleported along with the puddle of water, and his aura became stronger with each teleportation. The gold-tier warrior's aura had reached its apex after 9 teleportations. A sky-blue phantom the size of a small mountain appeared in front of him. If that phantom hit him, it would be the same as if a real mountain hit him. His bones and tendons would definitely break. The mermaids held their breaths nervously. They assumed a battle stance while they protected the little mermaid. However, before they could make a move, Watson had already taken a step forward. Platinum tier druid secret skill, Dragon Transformation. Light burst forth from Watson's body, and diamond-shaped scales covered his body and rapidly expanded. In an instant, he had turned into a tiny dragon that was a few meters long. He extended his ferocious dragon head forward and let out an angry roar at the gold-tier crew that was charging toward him. Roar! The sound waves spread and destroyed all the cabins in their path. The mountain shade that the gold-tier crew members had conjured immediately fell. Their bodies flew backward and collided with the cabin wall, and left a deep human-shaped hole. Another crew member, who was holding a plate and did not have time to react, foamed at the mouth as he fell to the ground. His pupils had also rolled backward. The dish in his hand dropped to the ground and broke into pieces. Golden meat was strewn across the floor. Then, Watson changed his body and deactivated his dragonification. He clapped his hands as if he had just done a trivial thing. Let's go. What's wrong? After 2 steps forward, Watson realized that the mermaids were not following him. Instead, they were looking at him strangely, which made him stop in his tracks. The druid secret skill, that's an archer's skill. You are a mage and a priest, and you also know the archer's skills? How many classes are you trained in? The mermaid's voice trembled slightly as she asked that. Judging from the youth's appearance, he should be only 12 or 13 years old. Since when did a human child have such powerful strength? Humans were not the most powerful of all races. Had they evolved without the sea folk's knowledge? I know a little of the basic skills of every class. I dabble in everything, but I'm not proficient in anything. Watson smiled modestly. His remarks led the adult mermaid's expressions to grow even weirder. If the power of a casual attack could not even be called proficient when compared to a full-strength strike of a platinum-tier elite, then no one in that world could claim to be proficient in their class. Despite their shock, the mermaids could not help but guess the young man's identity. The sea folk possessed a fair amount of understanding about humans. They had never heard of such a youthful and powerful human being. The mermaids followed Watson closely, their emotions tangled. They did not notice the youngest mermaid, who they shielded, was staring at Watson with a weird light in her eyes. They left the bottom cabin and walked up to the deck. There had been quite an uproar since Watson had turned into a dragon and used his roar to knock the 2 gold-tier warriors unconscious. There were more than 10 people on the deck. The leaders were gold-tier warriors. They were holding long spears, and the row behind them was holding bows and arrows. Their bodies radiated a silver-tier aura as well. It's an attack. Everyone, get ready to release your arrows. The 10 archers in the rear row immediately stood by and pointed their bows and arrows toward Watson, under the orders of the few gold-tier warriors in the front row. Their entire body flew into the sky before they could make a move. Platinum-tier spell, Super Black Hole. A black hole emerged in the sky and drew the 10 archers up, allowing them to only bounce and scream in mid-air. They were terrified, and their faces were pale. That is a platinum-tier spell? The enemy is a platinum-tier mage. The gold-tier warriors barely resisted the display, and their expressions turned darkened. Platinum-tier mages were not something they could fight, even if they outnumbered their enemy. They could only shout helplessly. Who are you? Why are you attacking our ship? This ship is young Master Casey's property, and young Master Casey is the Ptolemy family's young master. I know. You still dare to do this even if you know about it. The floating city belongs to the Ptolemy family. If you dare to do such a thing here, even if you are a platinum-tier warrior, the Ptolemy family will not let you off. Arg! Watson had already teleported in front of the few gold-tier soldiers before they could finish their words. He slashed the gold-tier warriors' necks a few times, causing them to faint on the ground. You guys really talk too much nonsense. The mermaids behind Watson put down their hands that were ready to attack, their expressions numb. They thought that the journey to escape from the water tank would be extremely dangerous, but it seemed that they did not need to do anything. Watson could handle all of them by himself. The underground river should be connected to the big lake outside. No one can stop you now. You can leave. Watson approached the deck's edge and gazed down. The large ship had already sailed into the floating city's river. Smaller waterways spread in all directions in front of them. Ships floated on the water's surface, and there were only a few roads and bridges on land. The floating city's entire waterways were dedicated to water transportation. It had lived up to its name as a waterway city. That kind of situation made it easier for the mermaids to leave. It was impossible for an average person to catch the agile mermaids in the intricate canals that extended in all directions. We are very grateful to you for saving us. We will definitely repay you if an opportunity arises in the future. The mermaids were grateful to Watson. They had brought the youngest mermaid to the deck and were about to jump down when she abruptly turned around and peered at Watson's face with her huge round eyes. I have introduced myself, but you have not told me your name, have you? Watson was stunned for a moment. My name is Watson. Watson. Yes, I'll remember it. The little mermaid glanced at him again with considerable trepidation and nodding solemnly. The other mermaids dragged her into the water, where she vanished in a few waves. Casey's enormous ship could cruise on the city's waterways because of his fame. Almost no ships ventured to approach them. Watson had just beaten up the crew without anyone noticing. That was also why Watson felt relieved when the mermaids left. I'll clean up the scene next. But before that, Watson left the deck and went to Antonio's rocking chair. He looked apologetic. Master, I'm sorry. I couldn't help but use my platinum tier power again. He had intended to show his gold tier power and beat up the people on the ship. However, he was angry when he saw that the boat had enslaved other races and even tortured the girls for food. He chose the most brutal and direct method to deal with them. It doesn't matter. After all, it's to rescue other people. It's right to do more good deeds. If you do good deeds, you will definitely be rewarded. Antonio narrowed his eyes and looked at the water surface in the distance. A tiny crystal crown flashed and disappeared in a single moment. Then, he changed the topic. You have been very restrained in your attacks. If this had happened a few days ago, you would have broken the ship into pieces. It seems like you are improving your control. I owe it to your excellent teaching. Watson had not stayed idle for the past week. He had been practicing the method to control his aura that Antonio had taught him. There would no longer be any earth-shaking phenomena during his future attacks. Well, we've investigated the strange cries and solved the problem. I wonder how Nightingale is doing. Watson looked at the main cabin after the chat with his master. Chapter 332, Go on, we're listening. Casey paced in his cabin with a glass of wine in one hand and unbuttoning the buttons of his clothes with the other. He admired his own body in front of a mirror. His cheeks and neck were wheat-colored due to his regular exposure to the sun and wind, but the skin below his neck was pale. Even though he lacked powerful muscles, his physique was not horrible, save for a bit of belly fat. He was lean, not obese like the usual nobleman, which was also why he could seduce girls. How should I enjoy the two girls later? The corners of Casey's mouth rose, and he took a sip of the red wine in his glass. Even though he had tasted many girls over the years, he was still amazed by the two women he had just seen on the small boat. He was very good at judging women. The most important thing about women was not their appearance but their temperament. There were too many beautiful women in the entire kingdom, but only a few were good-looking and had an extraordinary temperament. Nightingale and Denise were quite special among other beautiful women with a good temperament. They looked at him with fearless eyes. He wanted to make them into slaves who only knew how to obey him. It would give Casey a great sense of achievement as a man. Women always take a long time to take a shower. I really hope they come here soon. I can't wait. Can't wait for what? At that moment, a cold voice suddenly came from behind him. The door was kicked open with a bang. Nightingale had just taken a shower, so her short black hair was wet on her shoulders. Some of her hair was still stuck to her pink face, making her look very pitiful. Her bare shoulders were also very attractive. Denise, who was standing next to her, also looked gorgeous. Compared to Nightingale's youthful aura, Denise was like a ripe peach. Her round breasts inflated the gown, and the golden red scales on her bare skin gave her a mysterious and seductive wild charm. Of course, I can't wait to see you too. Casey admired Nightingale and Denise's figures and appearances greedily. He licked her lips, and the breath he exhaled from his nose became heavier. Those dresses are fitting for two beautiful women. Indeed, beautiful clothes need equally beautiful women. Come here, let me have a good look. What if I refuse? Nightingale laughed. You think I'm asking you? This is an order. Casey walked to the table, put down the wine glass, and clapped his hands. Paul. Young master, I'm here. The old butler spoke, and then his men teleported behind Nightingale and Denise from somewhere. Ladies, please get into young master's room obediently. I don't want to be rough with you. What would you do? Denise raised her eyebrows, pretending to be flustered. Casey laughed. I don't know if you are innocent or stupid. What else can we do? Of course, I'd caress your body and kiss every inch of your skin. So you're coveting our bodies, so you invited us here. You lied to us when you said you would treat us to a meal as a host. You finally understand me. Casey no longer tried to hide it. That's my purpose. I did not expect you to be so gullible. I advise you to cooperate with me so that I won't bring you to the interrogation room after I've had enough fun. I might even give you some money. If you don't cooperate with me, I will throw all of you overboard for the fishes, including that young man and the child. I see. Well, we're willing to cooperate with you. Nightingale pondered for a moment and suddenly revealed a brilliant smile. There was a flash of killing intent in that smile, but unfortunately, Casey, who was already very excited, did not see it. As Nightingale agreed to that, she and Denise immediately entered Casey's room. The door immediately closed, and the butler, named Paul, was standing outside to prevent anyone from disturbing Casey's mood. He crossed his hands on his abdomen and closed his eyes to rest. He used his combat aura to seal his ears. He had done that kind of thing too many times and was very familiar with it. Not long after the door was closed, a scream immediately came from inside the room. The scream was very high-pitched, but only a trace of it passed through layers of combat aura and entered his ears. It seems that young master is really enjoying himself today. It's so intense. After the scream, there was a faint trace of a strange dragon's roar. Paul still did not pay attention to it because Casey's women would always make all kinds of beastly sounds like dogs barking or pigs oinking. Bang, bang, bang. Some time later, the old butler felt the door behind him shake violently. It was as if someone was knocking on the door. It was as if he heard someone say his name and asked him for help. He laughed out loud. He kicked the door behind him. Those two women must not have been able to bear the torture, so they are at the door, trying to escape. As a professional butler, how can I let that happen? Since young master is having such a good time, he might reward me with a lot of money after this. The old butler was still fantasizing about it when he noticed two people walking over from the direction of the deck. They were Watson and Antonio, whom he had invited onto the ship previously. The two of them were in a discussion as they walked. Master, I heard that many noblemen have strange hobbies. They like to buy young girls from other races as slaves. It's probably fine for the sea folks. After all, they can have legs for a short period. What about those without any legs? For example, I've heard of a race called Medusa. The female's top half of the body is human, but the lower half is a snake. Actually, many noblemen don't buy those foreign girls to enjoy themselves. They just want to satisfy their curiosity. Even if they don't have legs, they still have hands and mouths. Those noblemen will do anything. Watson, you're still young. Sometimes, that world is darker than you think. Why are you two here? Where are the guards? What are they doing? The butler widened his eyes when he saw the two people. He was furious. Usually, Casey's cabin would have guards to protect it. Those two would not have been able to get into the cabin. Were they neglecting their duty? Guards? Are you referring to those people? Watson opened his right hand. A black hole immediately appeared in the sky, and a group of people fell from it. They groaned painfully on the ground. They were the elites that guarded the ship. What's going on? The old butler's eyes widened even more. Those guards were at least silver tier, and there was no lack of gold tier elites among them. Furthermore, they were very good at team battles. That was why they were able to catch those mermaids from the sea. However, those people looked as if they had been defeated because they could not fight back. If those two people in front of them were elites, then those young ladies would not be weak either. The old butler's expression suddenly changed when he thought of the miserable screams that came out from the young master's room. He removed the combat aura seal on his ear and pulled the door open hurriedly. The room was covered in blood, but it was Casey's blood. At that moment, Casey was lying on the ground. His face was swollen like a pig's head, his body was full of wounds, and his clothes had been torn to shreds. Nightingale was standing on him. She lifted her high-heeled shoes and kicked him again and again. That was how he got the bloodied wounds on his body. Every time Nightingale kicked him, a small jet of blood spurted out of Casey's wounds, making him look like a broken watering can. "Aren't you going to kiss every inch of our skin? Don't you want to see what you look like? In return, I'm going to kiss your skin with the sole of my shoe." "Young master, Master Antonio, you're here." Denise sat on a chair at the side and snapped her fingers. A ball of flame swept over Casey's body, scorching and scabbing a small part of the wound caused by Nightingale. She was responsible for stopping Casey's bleeding to prevent the fragile young master from dying due to excessive blood loss. Then, she saw the opened door and Watson and Antonio standing outside. She immediately stood up and bowed respectfully. Nightingale also noticed the people outside. She stopped, took a handkerchief to wipe her shoes, and then threw the bloodied cloth at Casey's face. "What did you do? How dare you do such a brutal thing to the Ptolemy family's second young master?" The old butler was stunned for a few seconds when he saw the terrible scene inside. He rushed inside and knelt beside Casey. He tried to lift the wounded man. "Young master, are you in pain? What do you think?" Casey wanted to say that, but he could only cough up blood. He curled into himself weakly and glanced at Watson and the others with fear and hatred. He cursed inwardly. "D****, I miscalculated. I didn't expect these people to be so strong. I also don't know where they came from. When I return home, I'll investigate this properly. If they don't have any background, they'll be dead for sure. Don't worry, young master. I won't let them off so easily." The old butler stood up heavily and pointed at Watson and the others. "It's still not too late for all of you to kneel and admit your mistakes. Otherwise, you'll be hacked into pieces and thrown into the sea for the sharks. Idiot, don't provoke those people at a time like this. Let's talk about that after this." Casey struggled to get up from the ground. He wanted to say something, but he coughed up blood again. "Are you threatening us?" Nightingale's face seemed cold. "I'm not threatening you, I'm telling you the truth. Every time young Master Casey ravages the girls, he'll use cruel methods to dismember them. The Ptolemy family is very powerful in the floating city. If you don't kneel, admit your mistakes, and beg for forgiveness, you'll suffer the consequences. Young Master once raised several girls as wild beasts and let them fight each other in a cage." The old butler cleared his throat and loudly proclaimed the brutality of his young master. He did not notice that everyone's eyes had turned cold. "So you've done so many disgusting things. It seems that my punishment for you was too light." Nightingale raised her right leg and kicked Casey into the wall. Casey's hands were limp, they were obviously broken. You dare to kill him? Didn't you hear what I just said?" The old butler screamed. "Go on. We're listening." Watson and the others turned their heads in unison. If the butler had not revealed so many secrets, they would not have been so cruel to Casey. Chapter 333, A Dinner with the Ptolemy Family. Watson had to admit that young Master Casey's butler was a very talented storyteller. The butler had released much information about Casey as if he wanted to threaten them, but he only succeeded in arousing their anger. They only left the ship after beating Casey half to death. Nightingale was furious when she left. She ordered the heaven-devouring Rat King to disguise himself as a water dragon and bite a few holes in the bottom of the ship where Casey was. If they were lucky, the ship would have sunk to the bottom of the sea before they could reach the city. How can those young masters be so hateful? Don't they know that humility, courage, honesty, and kindness are the true virtues of a nobleman? Nightingale snarled when Watson and the others reached the hotel. Power will breed corruption. In this world, it is the same no matter which force reaches a certain level. But not everyone will be like that. Some noble children are always just. Antonio sighed and comforted Nightingale. He had lived for hundreds of years and experienced the changes of several generations of kings in the Holy Dragon Kingdom, so he was used to that kind of thing. It would not cause any ripples in his heart. As long as the whole kingdom was stable, he would not ask about those things. Therefore, he did not let Nightingale kill Casey. A minor punishment was enough. If they had killed an heir to the Ptolemy family, there would undoubtedly be a war that could lead to a greater disaster. Master, I think that the corruption is the king's incompetence. If the current king is competent, the noblemen would not be so rampant. Watson only agreed with a part of what Antonio had said. The people in that world were different, indeed. Some people were kind-hearted, and some did evil things, just like the two noblemen they saw, Christina and Cassie. Even though the former would occasionally scheme against others, she was generally an upright person. The Sword Saint family was not as powerful as the three archdukes, but their status was higher. Their family members were not as proud as Casey. Was it because the Sword Saint family was not strong enough? It was obviously not. That was related to one's growing environment and family's nurture. Watson felt that if the king issued strict laws and slightly suppressed those noblemen, they would not dare to be so presumptuous. He wondered what the king, who everyone revered, was thinking. Perhaps he believed that corrupt noblemen were easier to control. Watson thought about it for a while before giving up on those thoughts. With his status and identity, it would be impossible for him to change all of that. Unless he reached the top and became the king, that goal was still very far away. He could only take care of himself and do things that he could. Master Antonio, what kind of trial am I taking in the city of Stanley? Can you tell me now? Watson looked at his master after they checked into the hotel. I told you that the trial is related to the sea god, Trident. He is the source of the Ptolemy family's power. It's simple. Defeat Trident and dive into the sea to replace the artifact. Let it run for at least 1 day. If you could do it, it means that you passed the trial. Let it run for a day. Watson sucked in a breath of cold air. That's right. Antonio stroked his bald chin. You have enough attacking power now, but the details are not enough. Whether it is fighting techniques or spells, each component can work together. You'd understand those moves when you knew how each component works. I see, Master. I understand now. Watson nodded. Antonio meant to let him understand the nature of power, just like how he could use the system to fuse 2 spells into a new one. He wanted to understand how he could do that. Can I really run the entire city for a day by myself? Watson was filled with anticipation for the next challenge. At the same time, he felt a sense of pressure. The trial was different from the previous one, where if he failed, he could just do it all over again. However, if he failed at that challenge, it meant the entire city of Stanley would be in danger. Once the power source was lost, the city would no longer float on the surface of the water. Instead, it would sink to the bottom of the water. Who knew how many lives it would take? While he was thinking about all that, Watson suddenly thought of a problem. Master Antonio, I remember that the sea god's trident is a divine artifact controlled by the Ptolemy family. We just beat up their second young master. Will they let me take the trident after the trial? If you hadn't beaten up Casey and the others, they might not have allowed it. But now, I can guarantee that they will definitely let you participate in that trial. The Ptolemy family will be here soon. Antonio looked out of the hotel as if responding to his words. As soon as he finished speaking, a gorgeous carriage appeared outside the hotel. The carriage had a pendant in the shape of a water droplet, and the curtains were engraved with a tide badge. Teams of soldiers armed with long spears and blue armor were around the carriage. There were hundreds of them. They quickly tidied up the road, allowing the carriage to stop at the hotel entrance. The carriage's curtain lifted as a tall woman walked out. That woman was wearing a sky-blue aristocratic dress and a light veil over her face. When she walked out of the carriage, the woman immediately turned around and stretched her hand outward. Another tall and thin man with a handlebar mustache and a high hairline came out of the carriage. He was wearing a navy uniform that was different from the traditional aristocratic attire. His every move was filled with dignity. That tall and thin man was the head of the Ptolemy family, Daniel Ptolemy. His wife, Jenny Ptolemy, was beside him. "Paul, do the people who beat up my child live here?" the tall and thin man asked. An old man dressed as a butler immediately came out from the ranks of soldiers beside him. It was the man whom Watson and the others had seen on the ship earlier. At that moment, the butler was wet. His white hair stuck to his face, making him look very pathetic. "Yes, master. According to my investigation, those people are here. Not only did they beat up young Master Casey and let the mermaids go, but they also destroyed our family's precious gold-tier magic ship. Those people are really audacious. Master, please punish them severely. Paul, I seem to have taught you not to say anything unnecessary when you are outside." Daniel glared at the butler in front of him. The man immediately broke out in cold sweat and retreated to the side, not daring to speak. Ignoring the old butler, Daniel held his wife's hand and walked into the hotel. There were a few guests, but they did not dare to speak when they saw the situation. Even the shop owner hid behind the counter and held his breath. "Who is the person who beat up my child?" "I am Daniel Ptolemy, the head of the Ptolemy family. Don't worry, I already have a rough idea of what happened from Casey. The cause of that incident is my child, so I will not harm you. I am just here to confirm it." "Daniel, after so many years, you have become a little more like the head of the family." No one spoke as Antonio walked out with a wooden staff. "You are." Not recognizing the person in front of him at first glance, Daniel turned his head in confusion. "You don't even recognize me?" Antonio chuckled, his handsome young face blurred and transformed into his original look. "How about now, Master Antonio?" Daniel widened his eyes and quickly let go of his wife's hand. He knelt on one knee and bowed respectfully. "I did not expect that you were the one who taught my son a lesson. I'm very sorry to have troubled you." He knew the man in front of him. After all, in the past 10 years, he had gone to him many times to ask him to become a teacher with the Ptolemy family and teach his sons. However, the man had refused him every single time. He had already planned to be polite with the person who had harmed his son. Then, he would invite them to his house and then kill them there to vent his anger. After all, he cared very much about their reputation. However, he had changed his mind after he learned who the other person was. He was furious with his idiotic son, who did not only do those offensive things, but he had offended Antonio. Daniel would not dare to attack the astrologer even if he had the guts to do so. It looked like he would never get Antonio to be his son's teacher. "My dear, are you sure that the person in front of you is really Master Antonio?" Jenny, who had followed Daniel in, had stared at Watson and the others with hatred in her eyes. However, her gaze turned into suspicion when she learned that the man was the astrologer. She did not immediately believe the identity of the person in front of her. "It's true. Jenny, you have to be respectful toward Master Antonio. Hurry up and bow." Daniel had been dealing with the astrologer for more than 10 years. How could he mistake him for someone else? Even Antonio's young appearance looked familiar to him. Even though Antonio had somehow become younger, he was still the greatest mage in the kingdom. It was not strange for him to do anything. Jenny hid the resentment in her heart and knelt with him. "We are old friends. There's no need to be so formal. Please, get up." Antonio stretched his hand outward, and a breeze blew on the ground, gently lifting Daniel and Jenny. After such a move, the doubt in Jenny's eyes also disappeared. "Come, let me introduce you to this young man beside me. He is my new apprentice, and his name is Watson. As for Miss Nightingale and Miss Denise, they are Watson's handmaidens. So it's young Master Watson. I've heard so much about you. And Miss Denise, have we met somewhere before? Daniel's pupils contracted for a moment before he laughed heartily. He extended his hand toward Watson while looking at Denise with a puzzled expression. That was the second person he felt familiar with that day. No, you must have mistaken me for someone else, Lord Daniel, Denise bowed and replied indifferently. Daniel did not hesitate. He turned around and said, Master Antonio, you didn't inform us in advance of your arrival. I haven't been able to make any preparations. The Ptolemy family will hold a banquet tonight, and I hope that you will be able to attend it. Of course, it's been so long since we last met. I will definitely show up. By the way, I hope that you can help me with something. Since it's your request, I'll do my best to do it for you. Don't worry. I won't make things difficult for you. I just need to borrow your family's sea god for a day. Daniel's jaw dropped in surprise. Hey! Chapter 334, A Shock for Everyone. It was nighttime at the Ptolemy family home. A long table was placed in the flower bed. Groups of people dressed in gorgeous clothes walked past and danced there. The light of the stars shone on a massive fountain in the middle of the dance floor, and the water droplets cracked into spots of silver light. Watson sat in a remote corner and fiddled with his knife and fork in boredom. He took a piece of beef from the silver plate in front of him and put it into his mouth. Half a day had passed since he met Daniel. Since Antonio had taken the initiative to reveal his identity, Daniel had only hesitated for a moment before agreeing to Antonio's request. As expected, compared to strength, status is more useful in the kingdom. If they did not have Antonio with them, they would not be able to attend the dinner party, and they would also fight with the Ptolemy family. Even though that was a world where the strong were respected, they did not have power. It was just that it was easier for the strong to obtain more power. Watson became more determined to become the ruler of that kingdom and not let his fate and that of his family and friends be manipulated. You must be the disciple that Master Antonio recently took in, right? You are very talented. Even your eating actions are so elegant. One look and I can tell that you come from a large family. May I ask which family you are from? While Watson was eating, a golden-haired young man in an expensive suit came up to him and praised him softly. His praise almost made Watson spit out the meat he had just eaten. Generally speaking, a nobleman's compliments were usually given out of courtesy. They would usually praise the other party's appearance and clothing. However, the young man in front of him praised his elegant eating posture, and he could not find any words to describe it. I'm from the border, a down-and-out baron family. Watson chewed on the beef a few more times and spoke vaguely. It did not conform to the etiquette of the nobles to speak while eating at the dining table. He did that to make the man retreat. It was Master Antonio's fault for revealing his identity, which caused many noblemen in the floating city to show an interest in him. The man chuckled. So you're from the border? I heard that people at the border are very forthright. I'm very impressed by such a quirky character. The blond man felt embarrassed by Watson's words and turned to look at the people sitting next to Watson, Nightingale and Denise, who were eating the pastries slowly. He said, My dear beautiful ladies, are you young Master Watson's handmaidens? I did not expect such beautiful women to be among the handmaidens. May I have this dance? Sorry, I don't dance with anyone other than young Master. Nightingale put down the pastries and moved her right hand. A sharp dagger penetrated the table surface, which showed how powerful it was. Denise hesitated for a moment and looked at Watson. Denise, if you want to dance, go ahead. Then I won't accompany you for now, young Master. Denise stood up and helped the pale-faced blonde youth onto the dance floor. Nightingale, dancing is a very good way for noblemen to socialize. If someone asks you to dance and you don't hate them, it's okay to go and dance. First, I can't dance. Secondly, that way of socializing disgusts me. No, I don't like most of the noblemen's activities, Nightingale said as she took the dagger from the table and ate the pastry that she had not finished yet. She stuffed it into her mouth with a look of disgust. Perhaps it was because of the incident with Casey. Nightingale hated the nobles. She also hated their activities. Why are they so arrogant? They just became Master Antonio's disciples. They are beautiful, yet they don't respect anyone else. Master Antonio is also very proud. There are so many talented children in the royal city. Even if the royal city didn't have them, they could have come to this city. Why did they have to go to the border to find a disciple? Doesn't he know what kind of place is the border? I heard that there are less than 100 noblemen there. It's a gathering place for barbarians. Judging from how those two ate, they must have not received a good education since they were young, especially that short-haired maid. She sat in her master's seat and ate. She has no manners at all. Several noble ladies gathered and discussed Nightingale and Watson's actions. Their faces were full of disdain. I don't know why the Ptolemy family would invite those people to a banquet. It lowers our standard to associate with them. Don't you think so? One of the girls there had light blonde curly hair that fell onto her back. Her skin was so white that it was almost transparent, and her eyelashes were a rare white color. It was the sunlight disease in that world. People who had that disease could not be exposed to sunlight for a long time, so it was naturally difficult for them to cultivate, causing the girl to look soft and weak. That girl was Lana Ptolemy, and she was the family's third young miss. Lana looked at Watson in the distance as her companions complained about Watson. Her eyes flickered with a different light, and she shook her head. No, I think those two people are very interesting. Lana, you are the host, so you would say something to protect your guests. But I think there's really no need to protect such people. Her companion added unkindly. Lana shook her head again, and the other girls were astonished. As she walked toward Watson, she said, "No, I don't mean to protect them. I'm serious. Young master, the Ptolemy family steaks are served according to the time slot. They're usually served once every 20 minutes. Judging from how you eat, you won't have anything to eat in less than 10 minutes. Your idea of using food to kill time won't stand." Watson raised his head and realized that a 12 or 13-year-old girl had appeared in front of him out of nowhere. Her hair was pale gold, and her eyelashes and eyebrows were pure white. She was staring at him with her light-colored pupils, and there was a smile on her face. Her two small dimples looked very cute. "So, what do you think I should do? Let's dance." The next song, Rumba Waltz, will take exactly 10 minutes. After that, you can enjoy the steak again. As he faced the girl's outstretched hand, Watson hesitated for a moment. Then, he smiled and stood up. He raised his hand and said, "Okay, then I'll do it." Watson and the girl entered the dance floor and began to dance to a melodious tune. At first, Watson's steps were a little out of sync, but soon he found the memories of several female experts who were proficient at dancing in the Einherjar's body. He used the fusion system to enhance those memories. Look at those two. At some point, the dancers on the dance floor slowly stopped moving. Many of them even began to retreat, making way for the middle area, where a young man and a girl danced near the fountain. The young girl was like a white butterfly, her movements light and otherworldly. The young man's movements were full of strength, like a strong tree that shielded the butterfly from the wind and rain, its leaves swaying with the wind. Every time the white butterfly spun to leave the tree, it would fly back to rest longingly in his arms. It was as if the young man's arms were her best harbor. So beautiful. A few women put their hands together, their eyes shining as they watched that scene. Some noble women looked at Watson and Lana, then at their partners, and then shyly pulled away from each other. The girls who had ridiculed Watson and Nightingale as barbarians from the border also widened their eyes in surprise. They were speechless at that moment. Even a dance master who had studied for decades might not be able to perform such a beautiful dance. If they were barbarians, they would not have been able to do that. Nightingale was holding a dagger and cutting the pastry in front of her fiercely as if she had a grudge against the cake. Every cut penetrated the table, causing the men who had wanted to get close to her to flee speedily. "Young Master Watson, you were lying when you said that you are from a down-and-out baron's family. Such exquisite dance skills can't be learned in a day." Lana twirled lightly in Watson's arms. She put her arm around Watson's neck. She had still needed to exert her strength at the beginning of the dance. After that, she did not have to do anything, she relied on Watson's strength to make those beautiful circles. "I'm not lying, and I don't have any dance skills. I'm just casually dancing." "Really?" Lana turned into Watson's arms. Her cheek was pressed in front of Watson, almost touching the tip of their noses. "When you injured my second brother's bodyguard, did you just casually hit him?" Watson narrowed his eyes. "I'm sorry, miss. I forgot to ask. You are?" "I'm Lana Ptolemy, the Ptolemy family's third young miss." Lana let go of Watson's hand and turned away. She lifted her skirt slightly and curtsied toward Watson. At that moment, the bell rang. No one knew who had started clapping. Under the thunderous applause, Lana strolled to Watson's side and tiptoed close to his ear. "Don't worry. I don't blame you for what you did. On the contrary, I'm pleased because I'm also very annoyed by what my second brother does daily. I just want to remind you that my brother is a vengeful person. You have to be wary of his schemes, especially against the people around you." Then, Lana turned around and left without turning back, leaving Watson with a frown on his face. Then, he relaxed. It seemed like Lana had good intentions, but he did not care about that. If Casey really wanted to do something, he would not be the one to suffer. With that thought in mind, Watson began to return to his seat. The noblemen looked at him differently from before. They looked at him with respect. A dance could reflect the etiquette of a nobleman to a certain extent. Watson could perform that dance because he had received high-quality dance lessons. "Young Master Watson, your dance was too good. I wonder if you are as outstanding in other aspects of noble etiquette as well." A hateful voice sounded. Watson turned around and saw Casey. He was the one who had spoken. His hands were wrapped in bandages and tied to his chest. His face was swollen, and he had a sinister smile on his face. Chapter 335, The Epoch-making Ship. "May I know what kind of etiquette you are going to test me on, young Master Casey?" Watson asked. No matter what it is, he would not turn it down. After all, the Einherjar's body contained the skills of all the powerful fighters from all walks of life. As long as he used the system to fuse those skills, he would be able to upgrade them to their peak at any time. It's not a test. As a noble, I just want to tell you that the most basic etiquette is to repay a debt of gratitude. If you damage someone's property, you have to compensate them. Do you understand what I am saying? I don't understand what you are talking about, young Master Casey. Casey pursed his lips and growled, Watson, you damaged my family's gold-tier magical ship, and now you are going to deny it. It was hard for him not to be angry. Not only had Watson and the others beaten him up, but they had also dug a hole in his magic ship. Fortunately, he had to hurry home to report that matter and take revenge on Watson, so he ordered them to speed up. The vessel had sunk just before they reached the mansion. Otherwise, if the ship sank halfway, with his strength and condition at that time, he might have drowned. After returning home, his father even taught him a lesson. Daniel was much more enraged about the damage to the magical ship than he was about his own son. That was understandable. After all, the Ptolemy family was a shipbuilding family, and the gold magic ships were the most precious ships of the Ptolemy family. There were only a few of them in total, and each of them cost close to 100,000 gold coins to build. The size of those magic ships alone was thousands of times that of an ordinary gold-tier tool. Furthermore, the ship had exquisite components, so the price could not be considered a common gold-tier tool. The ships he owned still relied on his status. He had to negotiate with his father for half a year before he got one. Since they were damaged, that debt would be on Watson's head. Damaged the Ptolemy family's ship? What's going on? Even as Master Antonio's disciple, that is too arrogant. When the noblemen heard Casey's words, they cried out in surprise. They looked at Watson in a different light. Is young Master Casey defaming him? Of course, some other noblemen had different opinions. Most of the people there were residents of the floating city. They knew Casey's character very well. Casey could only stomp his feet because his hands were broken. Paul, bring me that ship. As he spoke, the old butler appeared and descended from the sky. With a few gold tier guards, they carried a large boat from the sky and placed it in the middle of the floor. At that moment, the large boat was already in tatters. It was broken, and many of the parts inside were soaked in water, which meant it would rot. Other than that, there was damage caused by magic and battle techniques at the ship's bottom. Those were caused by Watson's fight to save the mermaids. The water tank that contained the mermaids was missing. Everyone, look! That is the wreckage that I ordered people to salvage after the ship sank. Look at it and see if the damages to the ship's cabin were deliberate. Do you think I'd intentionally destroy a valuable magical ship to frame the kid? There are many ways to frame him. Do I have to pay such a huge price? Casey looked around the room, attracting everyone's attention. Then, she looked at Watson. Watson, I know that you and I have a grudge against each other. You don't like me very much, but that is not a valid reason to destroy the Ptolemy family's property. That ship does not belong to me but to my family. Regardless of whether you are Master Antonio's disciple or whoever else you are, you have to give us an explanation. You can't bully the Ptolemy family just because you are Master Antonio's disciple, right? Watson frowned. Casey's words were not only slandering him but also sowing discord between his master and the Ptolemy family. Lana had reminded him to be careful with Casey, and then Casey had started to pick on him. Yet, even Master Antonio's disciple can't be so arrogant. Many of the other nobles nodded in agreement. Since the situation was biased in his favor, Casey began to add fuel to the fire. It was not only the boat, but those people also verbally abused and hurt me. I saw them arrive at the floating city, so I enthusiastically invited them to my boat for a meal. However, they did not appreciate my kindness, and they even stabbed me with a knife and broke my arm. That incident happened in front of the East Gate, and many people saw it. You just need to ask around to know if what I said is true. As expected, they are barbarians from the border. They only know how to resort to violence. They don't look like nobles at all. The girls who had just been amazed by Watson also found a reason to attack him. It was as if belittling Watson could raise their self-esteem. It's understandable if he wanted to hit Casey. I think Casey must have caused trouble with him, but it's not right to destroy someone's boat. The public began to change their opinion about Watson. Young Master Watson, I call you young master out of respect for you, but you have to solve this problem. A ship that belongs to the Ptolemy family is damaged. Let me ask you, how do you plan to solve it? I did destroy that ship. Watson nodded. He admitted it. Those who were still doubtful were stunned and revealed expressions of disbelief. Everyone was stunned for a moment before a look of joy flashed across their eyes. Everyone heard it. I did not force him. He said it himself. Now, everyone should understand that what I said is true, right? I was the one who destroyed the ship, Watson said again. His voice was covered by a combat aura and traveled far away, suppressing the commotion on the field. But it was because young Master Casey caught the mermaids without their permission, and I couldn't stand it, so I let the mermaid go. There was a fight with the guards on the ship after that. As for the injuries on young Master Casey's body, it was because he touched my maid, and then she had beaten him up. I see. I told you that there must be a reason Casey got beaten up. There's also the trading of sea folks. I heard that the Ptolemy family was involved in slave trading a few years ago, but there was never any evidence. Now it seems like they did do that. Whispers accompanied Watson's words, which made Casey feel embarrassed. Watson, don't slander me. The goods I'm transporting are only seafood, not mermaids. Do you have any evidence that I captured the mermaids? Why don't you let the mermaids come here and confront me? Also, don't think of changing the topic. First, how do you want to solve the matter of you sabotaging my ship? How do you want to solve it? Either you pay, or you fix the ship. First, the value of the ship itself is 100,000 gold coins. With the goods on it, the price is at least 200,000 gold coins, Casey said proudly. It would be fine if Watson had the money to pay for it, but he would definitely humiliate the younger man if he could not do that. Then I choose to repair that ship. Looks like you really can't come up with. Wait, what did you say? You want to repair that ship? Casey suspected that he had misheard. That ship was already in such bad shape that even the Ptolemy family's most advanced forgers would struggle to repair it. Even if it could be repaired, the price of repairing it would not be any lower than building a new ship. Why would Watson say that? However, that was also a good thing. Casey rolled his eyes. Watson had agreed in front of so many noblemen, and if he could not do it, he would lose their respect. Since you want to repair the ship, then you can start. If you can't repair it, don't blame me for not being polite. Watson could not be bothered to look at the clamoring Casey. He walked to the front of the damaged ship, twisted the ring on his finger, and activated the Wish for the World ring. The ship's broken parts were immediately duplicated by 10 times. System fusion, activate. Following his words, the broken parts turned into light and fused. In just a few seconds, the shadow of a colossal ship appeared in front of everyone. Congratulations, Master, on a job well done. You have obtained a peak gold tier ship. Gold tier pinnacle ship, Storm Deep Sea Submarine. Abilities, Protective Shield. When activated, it can resist the attacks of gold tier elites, flight, diving, deformation. The size of the ship can be changed according to needs, and the smallest can be as big as your palm. Speed increase. When traveling in water, the speed can be increased by 3 times. Automatic exploration, can automatically detect marine life within a 10-kilometer radius. One-way vision, the outer shell of the submarine is made of a special material, so you can see the outside from the inside, but not vice versa. Additional abilities, Storm Call, can summon a storm. Its power is comparable to a gold tier spell. Mine cannonballs, deep sea ships have cannons that can continuously release silver tier cannonballs. After the fusion, the hull of the gold tier submarine was 5 times larger than before. It was 50 meters tall and nearly 200 meters long. Unlike ordinary ships, the hull was not made of wood but gold tier metal. Even the cabin was covered in solid metal. The entire ship was like a giant whale, integrated into one. Other than a few sturdy doors, there was no place to enter. On both sides of the ship, there were 8 huge magic cannons aimed in all directions. There were also 2 huge wings that were folded on both sides. In front of the ship was a dragon head. That ship did not have a sail. There were only 4 huge propellers at the stern. The entire ship shone with a golden luster. It looked mighty and domineering. If it were placed in the water, one would not be able to see it clearly from afar. They would think that it was not a ship but some kind of terrifying sea beast. The ship has been restored. Casey's eyes widened as he stared at the huge ship that appeared in front of him like a lump of metal. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He suspected that he was dreaming. He walked up and stretched out his hand to touch the hull of the ship. It was cold to his touch. But what kind of ship is this? He had never even heard of a ship that was made entirely of iron. Things made of iron would sink the moment it entered the water, right? How do you use it? Watson, I asked you to repair the ship, but I did not ask you to use magic to put it together and turn it into an even bigger piece of trash. Casey questioned Watson. We'll know if it can be used. Watson waved his hand in front of him. Gold tier spell, silver snake on the surface of the raging sea. As the spell was released, an illusory sea suddenly appeared on the floor, gradually becoming real. Sea water splashed out and wet the clothes of a few noblemen. Before the crowd could exclaim about the terrifying power of Watson's magic, they saw Watson take a step forward, open the door of the submarine that had been fused, and walk into it. The moment the door closed, the submarine spread its folded wings and flew into the sky. Then, it plunged into the sea, swimming forward and backward like a steel fish. It was 100 times more agile than a normal ship. As it moved, the submarine activated the magic cannons on both sides. The 8 cannons roared at the same time. Hundreds of terrifying mine shells tore the sea apart and shot into the clouds, exploding into bright silver flowers. Chapter 336, Dealing with the Ptolemy family. Master Antonio, please have some black tea. That is the tribute tea that Earl Grey has grown for the imperial family. The annual output is only about 100 caddies. I finally managed to get a caddy from him after much difficulty. They were in the Ptolemy family's living room. Daniel pointed at a cup of black tea in front of Antonio. Antonio picked up the silver teacup and took a sip. As he felt the mellow tea flowing down his throat, he revealed an expression of enjoyment and nodded. Not bad. I only drink this kind of tea once in a while. I didn't expect you to be able to get as much as one caddy. It looks like the Ptolemy family has been developing quite well. When he saw Antonio drink the tea, Daniel rubbed his hands. Master Antonio, you flatter me. Thanks to the king's great affection and the help of the various families in the kingdom, the Ptolemy family has grown. Of course, our minimal achievement can't compare to you, Master Antonio. Previously, you told me that you wanted us to cooperate with your disciple to participate in the trial. I don't know when it will start. Actually, there's no need to be anxious about that. Master Antonio, you might as well stay with us for a while longer. Daniel's eyes flickered as he said that. Previously, he had asked Antonio many times to become his children's master, but Antonio had never agreed to it. As long as he let Antonio stay here for a while longer, even if Antonio still refused to become their master, he could still give them a few pointers from time to time. Daniel, I can already guess what you're thinking. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. I brought Watson here to head to the capital to participate in the Royal Academy's enrollment, and it will start soon. I would like you to arrange a trial tomorrow, the sooner, the better. To tell you the truth, Master Antonio, the city hasn't been peaceful recently. A group of sea folks appeared out of nowhere to covet the sea god's trident. They keep appearing and attacking our citizens. I have already sent soldiers to capture those sea folks, but they are too cunning. Oh, right, my second son, Casey, who is useless, was doing that too. Daniel, if you want to say something, just say it. No need to hide it from me. Antonio put down the teacup and waved his hand. He could see that Daniel deliberately mentioned Casey to help the young man find an excuse to explain the situation. According to Daniel, Casey did not capture those mermaids to sell them. Instead, he was working to protect the floating city. Then I'll be straightforward, Master Antonio. Because of the sea folks, our family has placed the trident in a very secret place and placed layers of seals on it. It can't be easily moved. Otherwise, if the sea folks discover it, they will send people to steal. Master Antonio, your disciple must ensure his safety during the trial. If he gets injured because of the sea folks, that would be my fault. You don't have to worry about that. Watson isn't a fragile child. It's a good thing because the greater the difficulty, the greater the improvement for him. Master Antonio, but... Daniel wanted to say something else. Even though he agreed to Watson's request for the sea god's trident for Antonio's sake, he was still worried. Watson must have extraordinary strength to be able to become Antonio's disciple. Otherwise, Antonio would not be at ease letting him replace the sea god's trident to supply energy to the floating city. However, Watson was a child after all. If something happened during that process, it would not be as simple as a simple malfunction. The entire city might sink. He was unhappy that Antonio's training would leave him to foot the bill. Before Daniel could finish his sentence, a servant suddenly rushed in from the outside. He went to Daniel and whispered a few words to him. "What did you say?" Casey brought out the damaged ship to make things difficult for Master Antonio's disciple, and in the end, Master Antonio's disciple had repaired it. Daniel looked at Antonio. "Master Antonio, there seem to be some problems outside. We will discuss these matters later. Let's go out and take a look." At that moment, the outside of the mansion was filled with laughter. "Is there anyone else who wants to experience that ship? Young Master Casey, I thought you didn't believe that the ship had been repaired. Why don't you come up and take a look?" Watson walked out of the submarine and used magic to freeze the surface of the water under his feet. Many noblemen and ladies followed him too. "This is the first time I've seen a ship that can sink into the water unscathed. That design is really amazing. Our family also manages the construction of some ships. If you have some free time, young Master Watson, I wonder if you can come to my residence and help build a few similar ships." A nobleman looked at the submarine that was docked in the water. It was obviously made of metal, but it did not sink. He sighed. When he was inside the submarine, he could see that the seawater was less than a meter away from him. However, he could not get it on him, which gave him a full sense of security. As the kingdom's largest water trading port, even if the shipbuilding industry in the floating city did not monopoly the whole trade in the entire kingdom, they were still at the forefront. Most of the aristocrats in the city were engaged in work related to sea transportation. Therefore, he could see the value of the ships Watson had created. First of all, the defense of such a ship was very strong, and it could avoid natural disasters such as tsunamis and thunderstorms. Secondly, the ship was in the water, so its concealment was greatly increased. It could also see any magical beast in the surroundings clearly, which increased the success rate of dodging or attacking. There was a most important point. The scenery is so beautiful. The sparkling bubbles are like the stars in the sky. If that was not a water surface constructed with magic, but a real ocean, it would surely be even more beautiful. Not far away from the men, a few ladies placed their hands on their chests, their eyes were shining. They recalled the colorful bubbles that rose from the seawater that they saw through the submarine wall. The biggest advantage of the ship Watson designed was that it could see scenery that normal ships could not. There were many things in the ocean that could not be seen on land. Usually, only the strong would dare to dive into the sea, but with that ship, even ordinary people could dive into the sea. If they could get that ship without hunting, they could earn a lot just by going out to see the scenery and charging entrance fees. After getting off the submarine, many nobles had thoughts running through their minds. The way they looked at Watson had changed. Previously, they were respectful to Watson because of his identity as Antonio's disciple, but after that, they realized that Watson was a capable young man. The only one who was upset was Casey. Faced with Watson's question, his expression was unsightly. He stared silently at the churning ocean and the large ship floating in the water in front of him. Even if he did not want to admit it, the ship Watson had built was indeed beyond his expectations. As the Ptolemy family's second young master, even if he did not specifically study it, he was very familiar with that knowledge. He finally understood that the ship was particularly amazing. It, that metal lump the brat created can really move in water. Isn't he a mage? How can he still build a ship? Did Master Antonio teach him that? Cassie thought about it with an ugly expression on his face. He had originally wanted to use the damaged ship to make things difficult for Watson, causing his reputation to be tarnished. In the end, he had helped Watson create a lofty image in the hearts of many noblemen instead. Is there any way to suppress that brat's arrogance? Casey pondered that. At that moment, Daniel and Antonio walked out of the mansion. It's so noisy here. What happened? Daniel looked around with a dignified expression. His gaze finally landed on Casey, and a hint of dissatisfaction flashed in his eyes. Father, didn't Watson damage our gold-tier magical ship? I asked him to repair it, and he really did repair it. Casey hurriedly went up to explain to his father, hiding the fact that he had deliberately made things difficult for Watson. Then, he turned his head to look at Watson and smiled. Watson, since you've repaired the ship, there's no need to show it anymore. I believe in your ability as Master Antonio's disciple. Now is the time to return that ship to our family. Return it to you. Watson shook his head. With a casual wave of his hand, the seawater that filled the entire courtyard instantly evaporated, as if it had never appeared before. The submarine slowly landed on the grass, and the hull of the ship contracted in a burst of light, turning into a palm-sized model. It landed in his hands. That ship can shrink? That's amazing. His actions once again attracted the nobleman's attention. The brand new ship that could fly and sail the seas was not only far more functional than ordinary ships, but it was also even more convenient to carry. If Casey had not mentioned that that ship belonged to the Ptolemy family, they would want to fork out money to buy it. I built that ship, so it is my property. If you want it, you can't ask me for it. You should pay to buy it, young Master Casey. Watson, what do you mean? I provided the raw materials for that ship. You only put in a little effort to build it. No matter how you think about it, that ship should belong to our family, Casey retorted righteously. As he looked at his father, he said, Father, don't you think I'm right? Even if Watson is Master Antonio's disciple, he can't take our family's assets for no reason. Furthermore, even if Watson wants to, Master Antonio can't agree to it. After all, who does he think Master Antonio is? I don't have any special identity. I'm just a mage who has lived for a long time in the kingdom. This matter has nothing to do with me. It's between Watson and you. Since it's a problem between two young people, then it's better for the young people to solve it. Antonio clearly did not want to care about it. That attitude made Casey feel a little uncomfortable. He could only look at her father for help. However, Daniel did not help him. Instead, he reached out and slapped his face. Casey's face was red and swollen. He could not help but take 2 steps backward. Blood flowed down the corner of his lips. Since his arms were wrapped in bandages and tied in front of his body, he could not rub his face with his hands. He could only endure the pain and show an expression of disbelief. Father, why? You idiot! Don't think that I don't know what you did. Apologize to Watson. Father. I'm ordering you to apologize. Or, you can choose to be locked up at home for 3 months. Every day, I will personally teach you the etiquette of a nobleman. Hearing Daniel's gradually lowering voice and feeling the strength in his words, Casey could not help but tremble. He knelt on the ground with grievance and lowered his head to say, I'm sorry. Don't say it to me. Say it to Watson. Daniel extended his hand and pointed into the distance. Casey's face was flushed red. Using all the strength in his body, he struggled to move in Watson's direction. Once again, he apologized and lowered his head even lower. Even without looking at him, he could feel the burning gazes from all directions. He knew that at that moment, his dignity had been lost. Ignoring Casey, Daniel walked straight to Watson. Watson, Master Antonio and I are old friends. If you don't mind, you can call me Uncle. Even though Casey is a reckless child, he is not a bad person. I know what he has done to you. I will punish him severely later. Don't take it to heart. As for that ship that you have built, it is yours. Daniel had a warm smile on his face, which made people feel as if they were bathed in the spring breeze. There is a famous proverb in the water city: crafts have no value in themselves. Only knowledge of crafting has value. The gold-tier magical ship had been damaged and turned into scrap metal. Now that you have repaired it, I will not take it back, and I will also have to thank you properly. You are too polite, Master Daniel. Watson's eyes flashed. He did not call him uncle. Although Daniel was very polite to him, just like a neighbor, he did not let his guard down at all. His 2 lifetimes of experience told him that the kinder a person was on the surface, the darker their heart. I'm not complimenting you, I'm just stating a fact. As expected, the people that Master Antonio values are not ordinary people. He had not taken in a disciple for many years. Previously, countless princes and ministers in the kingdom had wanted Master Antonio to teach their children, but he had rejected them all. From that point, it can be seen that you are more talented than any of the young nobles in the capital, especially my children. They can't compare to you at all. Realizing that his words did not appease Watson, Daniel nodded discreetly. At the same time, he looked angrily at Casey, who was kneeling in the distance. He could not help but feel a trace of anger rise in his heart. He looked at Watson. He was only 12 or 13 years old, but he was already a powerful mage. He could even modify a ship. Casey, who was much older than him, only knew how to flirt with women. He did not do his job as a father properly. Comparing people was an infuriating task. Watson, you've repaired our family's gold-tier magical ship. That ship is yours. Other than that, I will give you a sum of money as a reward. You can tell me how much you want. In return, I hope that you can help me with a small favor. Later, can you teach me how to build that ship? Daniel rubbed his hands together and revealed his true intention. All the noblemen there could understand the power of the boat that Watson had built. As the head of the Ptolemy family, how could he not understand that? He understood it better than anyone else in the room. In fact, the Ptolemy family had been innovating on magical ships for many years. Equipping the magic ship with wings and giving it the ability to fly was their main research achievement. It was just that he did not expect that the ship could fly into the sky and dive into the water. After he saw Watson's ship, he felt that he had opened the door to a new world. Just as he said, the knowledge of creating works of art is greater than the art itself. If he could mass-produce such a ship, in the future, the Ptolemy family would have an underwater fleet that would be invincible. So, Master Daniel, you want the blueprints for the submarine? Since you are so sincere, then I shall be generous. I can teach you how to make that ship, but I want 50% of the Ptolemy family's profit in the submarine industry. Watson, you're really asking for a lot. It takes a lot of manpower, resources, and time to build a ship. You didn't do anything but come up with an idea, and you want 50% of our family's money. Casey, who was kneeling in the distance, could not help but raise his head when he heard Watson's words. Shut up! Daniel turned his head and scolded Casey, who was about to say something. He turned his head and extended his hand to Watson in a friendly manner. So that brand new ship is called a submarine. It's similar to a hot air boat that can fly into the sky. That is not a bad name. All right, I can promise you that. I will give you 50% of the profit and an unlimited opportunity for you to stay for the floating city's trial. Just now, Master Antonio told me that he wants you to complete the trial on behalf of the sea god. The trial mentioned by Master Antonio is only for 1 day. Now, I've decided to extend that time. As long as you're willing, it won't be a problem even if the trial lasts for 10 days to half a month. At first, Daniel was hesitant to let Watson replace the trident in the trial, but when he saw the ship that Watson had created, he did not hesitate. Even if Watson had some problems during the trial, he would still make a profit as long as he got the blueprints for the submarine. That new ship had such an immeasurable value. Chapter 337, The Crystal Palace. At night, a family meeting was held in one of the Ptolemy family's meeting rooms. Other than Daniel and Casey, Madam Jenny, eldest young Master Mike, and young Miss Lana were also there. I still have a lot of important work to do in the Chamber of Commerce. Father, you summoned me back in a hurry. Is there anything important? The eldest son, Mike, was a mature man in his 30s. He had a brown beard on his face, and his curly yellow hair had been carefully groomed. He had just reached the meeting room and took off a black coat and threw it onto a chair. He sat down on the sofa in a dignified manner. Beside him were Lana and Jenny, while Daniel and Casey were sitting on the other side. There is an important matter, indeed. When Casey went out to sea this morning, he captured a few mermaids, but they escaped. That matter might cause the sea folks to retaliate against us. We will need to strengthen the floating city's defense system. Apart from that, Casey's gold-tier magical ship was also damaged. As Daniel spoke, his fingers tapped on the table in front of him lightly. Casey, who was next to him, lowered his head in shame and did not dare to make a sound. My dear second brother is still so ignorant. Did he take a fancy to some young girl on the way and end up being too busy enjoying himself on the ship, causing the mermaids to escape? After hearing that, the corners of Mike's mouth rose. The mustache on his face trembled as he spoke with a hint of mockery. We have no more than 5 gold-tier magical ships. Now that second brother has destroyed one, I wonder what else he plans to destroy next. Mike, don't try to frame me. Watson was to blame for the mermaids' escape. According to the guards on the ship, Watson was the one who defeated them. He even broke the precious water tank that was used to transport the sea folks. As for the damages to the gold-tier magical ship, it's also related to him. At the mention of Watson, Casey could not help but clench his teeth. The banquet had ended about an hour ago. Daniel had immediately invited Watson and Antonio to stay in the mansion. However, Watson had rejected him and had signed a contract with Daniel. After giving the corresponding contract to Daniel, Watson and Antonio immediately left the mansion and returned to the hotel to rest. Casey was happy that Watson had not agreed to stay. After all, he did not have to meet him all the time. At the same time, he was also a little angry. His father had personally invited him, but Watson had rejected his offer. Their family had spent half of their assets to obtain the blueprint in Watson's hands. He was responsible for that debt. Watson? Who is he? Mike had just returned and did not know about Watson, so he asked about him. Well, Daniel recounted in detail what had happened that day. After he finished speaking, he asked, Mike, what do you think? As he listened, Mike leaned forward. He listened very seriously. Then, he spread his hands and leaned against the sofa, seemingly relieved. I only have one thought. Fortunately, Father was smart and did not offend Watson, and how foolish my brother is, the Ptolemy family would suffer more in the future. Mike, did you come back just to mock me? Watson broke my arm, and his subordinates stepped on me several times. Furthermore, he caused our family to suffer a great loss. If it were you, would you have let him off? Casey stood up with reddened eyes. Jenny, who was opposite him, also stood up. She pulled him into her embrace and lightly patted his shoulder. My poor Casey, don't be angry. We will make Watson pay for what he did. But before that, you have to listen to your father. Your father's words are always right. Mike was the son Daniel had with his deceased ex-wife, while Jenny bore him Casey and Lana. That was why Casey could compete with Mike for the position as the future head of the Ptolemy family, even though he was useless. A trace of disgust appeared in Mike's eyes, but he did not show it. Lana, I heard that you had some private contact with Watson today and even danced with him. What do you think of that young man? Daniel walked past Casey and turned around to ask Lana. I think that Watson is a person who does not reveal himself. I can tell that he has received a good education since he was young. Furthermore, the strength he displayed today is definitely beyond an ordinary gold tier elite. Perhaps he is at the peak of gold tier. In addition to that, he can create an unprecedented ship. I feel that we should spare no effort to rope him in." Lana's eyes flickered, and she replied without the slightest hesitation. To reach the peak of gold tier at such a young age, one's future achievements would be limitless. At the very least, one would be a platinum tier. There were only a few platinum tier elites in the kingdom, and not a single one of them belonged to the Ptolemy family. If their family had a platinum tier backer, it would have been much more convenient for them to do things. Not to mention that Watson's boat that Watson had already surpassed the efforts of the Ptolemy family's several generations. Perhaps that was an idea that Watson came up with on a whim. However, if it was not the case, if it was an idea that he had just come up with, Watson would not have known if such a boat could be realized. Since Watson dared to make it during the bet with Casey, it meant that he had the confidence to win against Casey. Let's not talk about that. Watson is Master Antonio's disciple, so we must keep an eye on him. Lana's long white eyelashes trembled as she recalled Watson's astonishing dancing posture and handsome face when he danced with her. Not bad. If you weren't a girl and had a strange illness that even a famous doctor couldn't cure, you would have been a good choice to take care of the family in the future. Daniel sighed as he praised her. The Ptolemy family would hold a meeting every once in a while. He would ask the 3 children to answer questions. That was the way he assessed whether each child could inherit the family business. Lana was always the one who reacted the fastest and saw the furthest. If Lana were a boy, he would not have to worry about the future of the family. Tomorrow, Master Antonio will bring Watson to the Ptolemy family to participate in the trial. When the time comes, try to get close to him. It would be best if you could get the model of the new boat called Submarine from him. Even though Watson gave us the blueprint, the Ptolemy family hasn't studied that new boat. It would take at least a few years to build it. If we can get a sample, we can study it much faster. Daniel continued to knock on the table. His plan was very simple. He could not go back on his word on the surface after signing the contract with Watson, but he could cause trouble in the dark. If he could grasp the manufacturing method of the submarine, he would not need to beg Watson anymore. When the time came, he could simply send someone to make a fake account book to fool Watson. "Casey, you should go and see Watson tomorrow. I'm not asking you to become friends. At least make him forgive you. Don't have a hostile relationship with him. I don't know if you can understand the purpose of my arrangement. If you don't understand, then ask your big brother or Lana." As Daniel spoke, he stood up and glared fiercely at Casey. "I have to say, Casey, your actions today have greatly disappointed me. From today onward, you had better restrain yourself. Currently, Master Antonio is in the city. If any other problems were to arise at this time, even I can't save you." "I understand." Casey lowered his head weakly, but there was a flash of displeasure in his eyes. Clearly, he was not convinced. "Father, when the time comes, may I also chat with Watson?" Lana raised her hand at that time. "Of course." Daniel groaned, shook his head, and did not say anything else after noticing Lana's ability to entice Watson and the light in his second son's eyes. He turned around and walked out of the mansion. After a quiet night, the morning came. Watson pushed the hotel door open and walked out, yawning. He went to bed very late because after he fused with a peak gold tier submarine in the Ptolemy family's manor yesterday, all the nobles in the city came to him one after another, asking if the submarine could be sold or if the blueprints could be sold to them. Watson spent a lot of time getting rid of those people. "Hey, Watson, good morning." Just as Watson was thinking about what happened yesterday, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was none other than Casey, who had bandages wrapped around his hands and a face full of scars. The smile on his face was even uglier than when he was crying. There were 2 beautiful maids behind Casey, holding a gift box with exquisite snacks in their hands. "Watson, you haven't eaten yet, right? I brought some snacks from home. They are all very delicious. Have a taste." As he greeted Watson, Casey gave a signal to the two maids behind him. The two women immediately opened the snack box in their hands, took out some pastries, and placed them in front of Watson. "Young Master Watson, let us feed you." "Ah! Young Master Casey, what are you going to do now?" Of course, Watson did not open his mouth obediently. Instead, he took 2 steps backward. Why would Casey, who he had defeated yesterday, rush to the front of his hotel early in the morning and even send someone to bring him pastries? Did Casey harbor a grudge and was preparing to poison him with the poisoned pastries? "Watson, I came here today to apologize to you." Casey's smile became even more awkward. "I'm sorry for what happened yesterday, but you've already taught me a lesson. Let's call it even. From now on, I promise that I won't target you anymore. To show my sincerity, why don't I bring you to my usual places later?" Last night, after the Ptolemy family meeting, Casey returned to his room to talk to his mother, Jenny. He decided to get in touch with Watson before his brother did that morning. Although Casey was not very bright, he was not a fool. He knew that his father was unhappy with him. If he let Mike get in touch with Watson first, it was very likely that the person who would inherit the Ptolemy family in the future would not be him. For the sake of his own future, Casey decided to put aside his enmity with Watson temporarily. At the very least, before he obtained the submarine model from Watson and restored his position in his father's heart, that was what he planned to do. "I'm sorry, I'm going to the Ptolemy Manor to undergo the trial arranged by my master. I'm afraid I don't have the time to accompany you out. The trial can be completed anytime. The place I'm going to take you to won't take up much of your time. At most, it'll take 1 morning. Furthermore, the place I'm going to is related to your trial. Don't worry, follow me." Casey gave him a look. He did not give him a chance to refute him. The 2 girls who had just approached Watson and were about to feed him with snacks suddenly held his hands on both sides so that he could not escape. They smiled charmingly and led him away. That scene made many passers-by on the street look envious. The 2 handmaidens that Casey brought were only 14 or 15 years old. They were about the same height as Watson and had perfect looks. They were not very mature, but their breasts were very full. They looked like a natural pair with the handsome Watson. When Watson and the others left, they did not notice that the curtains of a room on the 2nd floor of the hotel behind them had been pulled open. A gaze was fixed on their backs. "That is where I'm taking you, the largest entertainment venue in the floating city. Watson, what do you think?" About 20 minutes later, Watson followed Casey to the underbelly of Watergate City, a building built in the water. The surroundings were underwater walkways built with magic, connected to a huge ball of light with a building that was several times smaller than the one in the floating city. Residents walked on the neon-colored streets. Their laughter could be heard through the water curtain. This underwater entertainment place is called the Crystal Palace. It was founded by the Ptolemy family. All the nobles in the floating city have invested in it. Most of the city's treasures are gathered in the Crystal Palace. Even if there is nothing on the surface, there will still be something here. Casey had a mysterious expression on his face. While he was explaining, he brought Watson through the water curtain. After crossing the water curtain, the Crystal Palace appeared in front of them. The water was pushed away from the building by an invisible force, forming a huge water shield that stretched for an unknown number of kilometers. The Crystal Palace is connected to the city's power source. It borrowed its power from the sea god's trident, so this place will not be eroded by the sea. I'll tell you a secret. The sea god's trident is stored here. If you're doing the trial, then this is your trial's location. Is it really okay for you to tell me those secrets before the trial starts? What does it matter? You'll know sooner or later anyway. Furthermore, the sea god's trident is not a secret in the Crystal Palace. As long as no one knows its exact location, it's fine. I heard from my father that the security in that place is very tight. Anyone who tries to enter will die. Let's not talk about that. I'm bringing you here for fun today. Let's not talk about such serious matters. As Casey spoke, the two of them had already walked into the Crystal Palace. When the two guards in sky blue clothes saw Casey, they bowed their heads respectfully. Greetings, young Master Casey. Prepare 2 carriages for us. We are going to the Iris Flower Tavern in the city. Yes, young master. The 2 guards quickly prepared the carriages for the 2 of them. Casey brought 2 maids to drive the carriages while Watson and Casey sat in the carriages. When they sat in the carriages, Casey touched the wounds on his body. He was in so much pain that he let out a hiss. Watson stared at all of that and did not say anything. He did not know why Casey had invited him. Did he want to apologize or set him up? Watson was prepared to continue observing for a while. It was already 10 minutes later when they arrived at the Iris Flower Tavern. Although it was called a tavern, it was like a large manor. The manor was covered with trees, and there was also a small artificial lake. The environment was excellent, and most of the people there were men. They were all dressed in luxurious clothes, and they looked rich and noble. Young Master Casey, it's been a few days since you've come here. Did the girls here not serve you well last time? As soon as they arrived at the door, a woman with a veil over her face and a full head of raven black hair walked up to Casey. The woman had green almond eyes, and she looked like she was in her 20s or a child in her teens. She had the mature charm of a woman and the naivety and cuteness of a girl. She looked very strange. She is a peak gold tier mage, and the magic she practices is a rare charm element. Watson felt judgmental when he saw the woman. At the same time, he felt a faint sense of familiarity with her body, as if he had seen her somewhere before. After thinking for a while, he remembered it. A long time ago, when he was fighting against the Demoness bandit gang, he had felt that aura from the evil god, the primordial Demoness, that the Demoness bandit gang had summoned. Watson only took a glance at that woman before shifting his gaze away. On the other hand, that woman's gaze suddenly fell on Watson. After looking at him for a long time, she revealed a smile. Young Master Casey, why did you bring a new guest with you today? I wonder who this handsome youth is. His name is Watson. He is Master Antonio's disciple and a friend of mine. Master Antonio? The kingdom's greatest mage, also known as the astrologer. That's right, it's him. He is the astrologer's disciple? It's an honor to have a big shot like you to come to our Iris Flower Tavern. Let me introduce myself. I'm the boss here. My name is Elvin. Of course, you can call me Little Yi. The veiled woman bowed slightly to Watson, and an inexplicable color flashed in her eyes. All right, Miss Elvin. Let's talk pleasantries when we have time. First, arrange a room for us. I want to take Watson to experience this place. All right, young Master Casey. I will definitely find the best place for you. In fact, our tavern has recently received a batch of high-quality goods. They are all virgins. I guarantee that you will have a heavenly experience here. The woman named Elvin smiled at Watson. Chapter 338, The Mermaid Princess Who Was Caught Twice. Young Master Watson, let me massage your legs. Young Master, do you want to eat? Watson was inside a manor. There was a huge magic crystal in front of him, playing pictures of scantily clad beauties with information attached to them. 2 tall and scantily clad elves sat with him. They were talking to him eagerly and leaning against him. That scene made him very uncomfortable. Watson, you don't need to feel so cautious here. This is the wealthy's money-squandering den in the floating city. The women are first class, and they are very discreet. No matter what you do here, no one outside will know, so you can rest assured and enjoy it. Casey hugged a scantily clad woman with one arm, and his large hands wantonly swam around her body, allowing the other women to feed him red wine. He wanted to rope Watson in. To him, there were only two ways to rope Watson into that world: money and beautiful women. Watson looked like he was 12 or 13 years old, and he was still a child. However, Watson was very strong and did not look like an ordinary child at all. In addition, Casey had already toyed with more than 10 girls at that age, therefore, he planned to use his beauty to test Watson first. When he entered the room, Watson had been unmoved by the many beautiful women surrounding him. On the contrary, the beautiful women around him were leaning on him. They seemed to like Watson's young and strong body very much. That scene made Casey a little jealous. It looks like this is Watson's first time coming to a place like this. It's no wonder. As Master Antonio's disciple, he must have been cultivating all the time and rarely had time to come into contact with other things. It's inevitable for a man to be unable to let go when facing such a situation for the first time. Just give him some alcohol. Casey raised his wine glass to Watson. Watson, a toast to you. Let's resolve the conflict between us. Watson raised his wine glass and took a sip. Pushing aside the few women around him, he stood up. Young Master Casey, I don't think there's anything fun here. I'd better head on to Ptolemy Manor. He had been observing the entire journey. It seemed that Casey wanted to apologize to him. Since that was the case, he should threaten to leave. If Casey wanted to do something, it would be the right time to do it. Don't be anxious, Watson. The real fun isn't here yet. Casey clapped his hands, and the door opened. A row of women filed into the room. Those women included humans, elves, and sea folks. They were all wearing exquisite long dresses. They were the same as the beautiful women who had just appeared on the giant magic crystal. However, chains were hanging around the necks of those girls, and the chains extended to their arms and ankles. Young Master Casey, this is the latest batch of slaves in the tavern. Each one is of high quality, and the lowest price is 1,000 gold coins per person. See if you and your friend have taken a fancy to any of them. Following the girls into the room was the tavern's lady boss. She smiled and pointed at the girls present. I'll take those two. Casey randomly selected two and walked in front of Watson. Watson, which one do you want? I'll pay for it for you. These girls are orphans who have been exiled to Watergate City. They are either illegal immigrants from other countries or the descendants of prisoners who have been defeated in the war. If we don't buy them, they won't be able to live on. Watson had no interest in buying slaves. He raised his head and looked at the girls in front of him. Suddenly, one of the mermaids attracted his gaze. She had a light scar on her face, and her fair legs seemed to have just been transformed. She could only barely support her body. Her face was full of fear. However, those were all magical disguises. There was a layer of magic on the girl's body, making her appearance, not her actual appearance. Watson's strength naturally saw through the girl's disguise at a glance. Under the girl's appearance was the face of an adult sea creature. Upon seeing that face, Watson's expression instantly changed because that face was not someone else's, it was one of the mermaids he had let go of yesterday. While he was observing, the mermaid also looked at him. She was stunned, then turned her head away and continued to pretend to be weak and not look at him. I had already let them go. Why would they appear here again and even deliberately put on a disguise? Watson was deep in thought when he suddenly thought of Alice's face. His expression changed, and he extended his right hand to point at the mermaid who had put on a disguise before him. Her, and her. Forget it. I'll buy all the slaves in that room. On the one hand, it was to conceal his true purpose of wanting that mermaid. On the other hand, he felt that those girls who were sold as slaves were too pitiful. He was unable to change the slave system in that world. The only thing he could do was to save those people in front of him. Anyway, Casey had just said he would pay for it himself, so what was there to be afraid of? As expected of Master Antonio's disciple, he is indeed forthright. I'll have to trouble young Master Casey to pay for it. There are 20 slaves here. I'll count it as 1,000 gold coins for each of them. You'll have to pay me 20,000 gold coins. I didn't bring so much money with me. Can I pay some of it later? The corner of Casey's mouth twitched. He glared at Watson with anger. No one would bring 20,000 gold coins with them when they went out, even if he was a young master. He had planned to be polite with Watson. If Watson only took 1 or 2 slaves, he would have accepted it. However, Watson had chosen 20 people at once. Who would have thought that Watson would be able to handle 20 people at once? He was not afraid that his body would be exhausted. While Casey was silently criticizing in his heart, he heard Elvin say, "Young Master Casey, we are a small business. We don't do business on credit. However, the Watergate Bank is just opposite the tavern. The Ptolemy family has saved quite a lot of money in there. You must have several 100,000 gold coins to your name. You'll only need to withdraw a portion, so paying is a piece of cake. Oh, right, I forgot to remind you. The tavern will hold an auction to auction some precious items. You might like some of it, so perhaps you should withdraw more money." While speaking, the tavern's owner, Elvin, used her hand to caress Casey's body. Her tone was gentle with a hint of charm, and her voice made Casey's body go numb. "Watson, wait here. I'll be right back." Then, Casey left the room with the 2 maids. In an instant, only Watson, more than 20 female slaves, and the tavern owner were left in the room. "Young Master Watson, I believe in young Master Casey's credibility. Since young Master Casey bought those slaves and gave them to you, they are your property. Later, I'll send someone to remove the chains around their necks." As Elvin spoke, she moved closer to Watson, but he reached out to stop her. "There's no need. I can open those chains myself." He snapped his fingers at those slaves. The chains on the necks of the slaves in front of Watson broke, including the chains on their shoulders and ankles. All the slaves were pleasantly surprised. "Our chains are broken? It is a unique anti-magic chain. An ordinary gold-tier mage would not be able to open it. How did he do it? No matter how he did it, he released us." "Thank you, sir." Very quickly, some of the slaves reacted and knelt on the ground, kowtowing to Watson. As expected of Master Antonio's disciple. "I did not expect him to be able to grasp the ability to follow the law at such a young age." Watson, on the other hand, clapped his hands as if it was a trivial matter. "Do you need anything else?" "No, then I won't disturb you for the time being." Then, Elvin retreated. Watson arranged for most of the slaves in the room to sit on the sofa. He pushed the red wine and pastries on the table in front of those people, indicating that they could enjoy them as they pleased. Then, he brought the mermaid to a room and closed the door. Swish! The moment he closed the door, Watson felt a chill from his neck. A sharp blade condensed from water elements was pressed against his neck. The water on the sharp blade kept flowing, and the splashing water shot a few holes in the wall. It's not a good idea for an acquaintance to attack as soon as they meet. Watson turned his head slightly. When his neck touched the water elemental blade, the blade had shattered. Before it touched Watson's neck, the water had only touched the hair on his neck before it disappeared. Watson turned his head and saw the mermaid behind him. At that moment, the mermaid touched the magical disguise on her face. Her legs had also become fishtail, and an illusory wave was dragging her along. "Shameless scoundrel, you dare to claim to be an acquaintance of mine? Yesterday, your lie convinced me so easily, so Princess Alice was caught twice. Tell me, where did you take Princess Alice?" The water sword in her hand was broken, and the mermaid could not swing her tail. A layer of water wall was between her and Watson, and the thick water wall pressed against a crack in the ground. Alice was captured again. Watson frowned, and a strange expression appeared on his face. Alice's cute face appeared in his mind. How could that little princess be so unlucky? She had just been released, and then she was captured again. Do you dare say that the matter has nothing to do with you? You just released us, but before we could escape from the floating city, a group of mysterious people in black clothes appeared. They had a special anti-magic large net, and they used that to capture the princess and us. Then they brought us here, the mermaid snarled. She felt that she had been deceived. Watson must have been working with those people. Rescuing them from Casey's ship was just a pretense so that they would lower their guard. She would not be fooled again. Chapter 339, The Powerful but Useless Young Master. Can you tell me where they caught Alice? Perhaps I can assist you. Watson handed the mermaid in front of him a bottle of red wine. She was devouring the pastries that Casey had purchased while drinking copious amounts of red wine. Her skin was flushed. The mermaid had just attacked him and promised that she would no longer trust him. However, it only took 3 steps for him to regain the mermaid's trust. The first thing he did was punch the wall behind the mermaid. Then, he led her to a chair and sat her down. Finally, he gave her some food. The mermaid looked up at the wall behind her as she heard Watson's question. The wall had crumbled, leaving a distinct fist mark on it. She narrowed her eyes. She had no intention of continuing to trust Watson, but Watson was too powerful. When Watson's fist landed behind her, the entire wall had collapsed, leaving her with a deathly tinge. If Watson's blow had been aimed at her, she would be a puddle of blood by then. As a result, even if she continued to distrust Watson, she could only tell him what she knew. I also have no idea where they took Princess Alice. I only know she was taken to somewhere different than the guards. As for us, we were separated and put in shackles. The group of people who captured us seemed to want to sell us as slaves. The mermaid wiped the food residue at the corner of her mouth, set the bottle of red wine in her hand down on the table as a frightened expression crept onto her face. I am not sure if they are going to sell the princes, but I am sure that they will sell me. I need to find her as soon as possible, but I have no idea where she is or if they have abused her. Can you tell me anything about the people who kidnapped you? Are there any distinguishing features or oddities about them? All I know is that they are all clothed in black and have their faces covered. They are members of the same group, but I am not sure about the rest. Oh, yes. They do have a peculiar aura. I am not sure what sliced off their pinky. I am sure about that because I've fought the same group before that. Could they be related to the Ptolemies? Watson stroked his chin and pondered that. Casey's voice came from outside at that very moment. I am back, Watson. Where are you? The door to the chamber opened as soon as they heard the voice. Casey sauntered in carelessly with 2 slave females he had just purchased. When he saw the chaos in the room and Watson and the mermaid sitting opposite him, he was taken aback. He recognized that the mermaid was one that he had previously captured. He did not know why she had appeared in that room and why she looked like she had just fought a big battle. You. Watson. Do not say anything. Please have a seat. Watson beckoned Casey with his finger. The 2 slave girls in Casey's arms were instantly pushed to the wall by an invisible force. Then, Casey was pulled in front of Watson and forced to sit on the chair. At the same time, the door closed with a muffled bang. Watson, what is it? What exactly are you doing? I invited you out of courtesy and even wanted to settle the dispute with you. Is this how you treat me? Casey struggled hard while sitting on the chair, but he was unable to resist Watson. He was terrified. Young Master Casey, please answer the following questions truthfully. If you answer honestly, I might be able to let you go. Then, Watson looked at the mermaid, and she promptly reached out her right hand. She held a sharp water sword in her hand and placed it against Casey's neck. Whatever you want to ask me, as long as it is something I know, I will tell you. Excellent. Did you send people to capture the mermaids again after I left your ship yesterday? No way. I returned to the Ptolemy family as soon as you went to meet my father. As you are aware, you have bored a hole in the magical ship. If I had not returned home right away, I would have died with the ship." Watson stared at Casey, his body exuding the terrifying pressure of a peak platinum tier warrior. Under that level of stress, Casey's body trembled like a sieve, sweat trickling down his forehead. Watson guessed that Casey was not lying. "Do you know a group of people dressed in black? Those people have a special characteristic, that is, they don't have a pinky." "I know them. You're talking about the Severed Fingers gang, right? They are the largest underground force in the floating city." "It's not just the floating city. Some said that their members are spread throughout the entire kingdom. Those people have one characteristic. Their fingers are more or less damaged. It is a ritual that they must complete when they join the gang. Based on their status in the gang, the members might lack a pinky, or they might not have a ring finger, middle finger, and so on. The people with severed pinkies are considered their outer members." Casey hurriedly responded. When Watson remained silent, he said, "Our family has nothing to do with the Severed Finger gang. Rather, it would be better to say that they are our family's sworn enemies. Because of them, our profits in the slave market have been reduced by more than half. My father has repeatedly wanted to find people to kill those people, but those people are like weeds in spring. After killing one wave, a new wave will grow. Watson, I've told you everything I know. Can you let me go now?" Casey shouted in a panic and made up his mind. If Watson let him go, he would leave that place without a second thought. He was kind enough to bring Watson there to enjoy himself. It was fine if Watson did not want to get close to the women. He still did not know Watson had contacted the mermaid he lost. Who had he offended? "I can let you go, but young Master Casey, before I let you go, I hope you can help me with a small favor." "What are you doing? Don't come over here." "Help." After about 10 minutes, Casey walked out of the room and used his teeth to rewrap the bandages on his arms. The 20 slaves and 2 female servants from the Ptolemy family stood outside the door. They were looking at him in surprise. Some muffled sounds were coming from the inner room, but they seemed to be blocked by something, so they could not hear them clearly. "That Watson's alcohol tolerance is terrible. I did not expect Master Antonio's disciple to be so weak. I knocked him down after only 2 sips. I was going to bring him here to enjoy it, but it seems that he won't be able to enjoy it. Haha. Rona, Lottie, bring these slaves back to the mansion. I will torture them when I get home tonight. As for now, I haven't had enough fun yet. I'm going to stay here. Young Master Casey, are you sure you don't want to bring us along?" The 2 maidservants named Rona and Lottie looked at each other and saw the doubt in each other's eyes. They were combat maidservants specially trained by the Ptolemy family. Their strength was gold tier, and their primary responsibility was to protect Casey, who was as weak as a chicken. If they left, it would not be good if Casey encountered any danger while he was there. "Don't worry. I'm a frequent guest here. The boss knows me, so who would dare to harm me? Besides, I'm a member of the Ptolemy family. No one dares to disrespect me based on that alone." As Casey spoke, he walked in front of the 2 maidservants and looked down at the 2 women. "You're not leaving? Are you planning to replace the girls in the house and play with me?" The moment he said that, the 2 combat maidservants shuddered. They knew what Casey meant by play. They immediately lowered their heads and said respectfully, "We understand, young Master Casey. We will bring these people back to the mansion." They did not dare to stay any longer. The 2 combat maidservants took the slaves and quickly left. In an instant, Casey was the only one left in the room. At that moment, the door behind Casey was pushed open. The mermaid walked out of the room and looked around. "They're all gone." One could see Casey lying on the chair in the room behind the mermaid. There was a massive bump on his forehead, and he looked like he had fainted. "Watson, I did not expect you to look so good in Casey's disguise. What are we going to do next?" When he heard the mermaid's question, the person who looked like Casey turned around and glanced at the real Casey in the room, revealing a smile. Next, of course, we're going to gather intelligence and find Alice. It's not easy to keep this disguise. Why don't we make good use of this identity? Watson had transformed into Casey to get rid of the group of people in the room. He was afraid that he would cause a big commotion if he used his original identity. Casey was different. As a regular guest there, many people knew that young master. He believed that he would be able to save Alice with just a little discreet investigation. Lady Mermaid, let's go. Before we investigate Alice's location, please tell me where your remaining companions are being held. I'll let them out. Watson, can you stop calling me Lady Mermaid? I have a name. It's Elena. Okay, no problem, Lady Mermaid. Elena was speechless. Then, Watson pushed the door open and walked out of the room. A few young masters in luxurious clothes passed by the corridor and saw Watson with bruises all over his face and bandages on his hands. He looked like Casey. They all stopped in their tracks. Is that you, young Master Casey? Why do you look so miserable today? I heard from Lord Mike that you were beaten up while you were out hunting. You even made a fool of yourself at your own family's dinner party. But it seems like you still have the mood to come to the Iris Flower Tavern. You sure are ambitious. Can your current physical condition satisfy a woman? Don't make the wounds on your body split open halfway. That'll just make them worse. A few young masters sneered at Watson. The Ptolemy family was the leader of the floating city, but it did not mean that everyone was afraid of Casey. After all, some of them were Mike's supporters. They wanted Casey to be as miserable as possible. Watson turned a deaf ear to them and wanted to leave. However, those nobles thought he had given up and went to Elena's side. This sea creature looks pretty. I'm afraid that you can't enjoy her in your current state, Casey. Why don't we get rid of her for you? Get lost. Just as those people were about to touch Elena, Watson spat out a word. The men were instantly sent flying more than 10 meters backward before crashing heavily into the wall with a muffled bang. Their bodies were embedded in the wall, countless bones were broken, and they groaned in pain. Elena, which room is your companion in? Watson asked. He ignored those men. Elena looked at the men embedded in the wall with pity as she pointed in a direction. The two of them were brought there. Watson and Elena walked away in that direction, leaving the group of nobles grimacing in pain while looking at Watson's back in disbelief. When did the Ptolemy family's useless young master become so strong to throw them into a wall? Chapter 340, Severed Fingers Gang. Bella and Rose looked at the ugly men in front of them, their faces wet with tears. They had experienced so many ups and downs in just 2 days. One day earlier, some evil humans had kidnapped Princess Alice because they had not guarded her properly. As a result, they met a kind young man named Watson. He had let them go, but the goddess of luck did not seem to care for them. A few short moments after that, they were captured by another group of people. They were restrained in anti-magic shackles. They had less than 1/10 of their strength left, and they were about to be humiliated. Why are you crying? This is Lord Glenn, often known as Mouse Tail. He is one of the Severed Fingers gang leaders. He would not have kept you here if you were ugly. He would have sold you to other noblemen, and they are not as kind as he is. They will torment you with torture equipment after violating your bodies, and then they will hack your bodies into pieces and feed you to the dogs. There were 4 burly men in front of Bella and Rose. A middle-aged man with shifty eyes and dirty grey hair stood behind them. He was looking back and forth between the 2 women, his eyes brimming with hunger. All of them were missing a pinky, whether it was the 4 burly men or the pitiful man behind them. Don't worry, I won't do anything to you as long as you cooperate with me obediently. If you do a good job, I might make you my concubines if I am in a good mood. You are well aware that you are only a pitiful mermaid. Giving you such a high status is part of my goodwill. The man named Glenn picked up a glass of red wine from the table. Even though he only had 4 fingers, his movements were the same as an ordinary person's because he was a thief before he joined the Severed Finger Gang. Flexible finger movements were his innate talent. After joining the Severed Finger Gang, he relied on his own wit and professionalism to quickly climb up to the small upper echelon of the group. He had hundreds of subordinates under his command. He was very happy that day because he received news from a guard at the city gate that the Ptolemy family's second young master had a conflict with someone, and Casey's magical ship had sunk. Their items on the vessel were also lost, which enraged the young master. Glenn knew that any goods that could enrage the Ptolemy family must be quite valuable, so he immediately assembled his men to begin a search beneath the city's canals. He discovered several mermaids in a sewer near the sunken ship, as expected. A young mermaid with a crown was among those mermaids. Glenn's years of slave trading expertise taught him that the crystal crown symbolized sea folk royalty. Only members of the royal family or those of royal lineage could wear one. He knew he had hooked a big one right away. He took the mermaids to the Severed Finger Gang at the Crystal Palace. As a reward, the higher UPS gave him 10,000 gold coins. So, he was ready to enjoy himself in the Iris Flower Tavern, which also belonged to the Severed Finger Gang. You despicable humans, even if I were to die, I won't let you have me. Bella, one of the 2 mermaid guards, assessed the people in front of her and the environment in the room. When she realized there was no way out, she cursed in the sea tribal language before she tried to bite her tongue to kill herself. Glenn, who had been sitting on the sofa, abruptly slipped through his men to approach Bella. He squeezed her chin with one hand and gripped her hair with the other, preventing her from biting her tongue and speaking in the same sea tribal language. Are you going to commit suicide in front of me? I'm a gold tier warrior. Even if you don't wear the anti-magic chains, you're no match for me. I admire your courage, but at the same time, I can't help but lament your stupidity. Your goods that I've captured. Logically speaking, you should fetch at least 1,500 gold coins. If you die, I'll lose more than 1,000 gold coins for nothing. You're violating my rights. I gave you a choice, but since you're not willing, you can only accept the punishment. Glenn clenched his fist around Bella's chin, which snapped with a crack. She could not stop crying since she was in so much pain. Glenn shook his head and said, when I am finished with you, I will give you to my men. I will pass you on to the next person after they have finished having fun with you. You will serve 1,500 people at the cost of 1 gold coin after every person served by an ordinary lady in the Iris Flower Tavern. I will let you go after I have earned enough from you. You are too generous, Boss Glenn. You're just a low-class sea folk, and this is the result of your resistance. Do you regret your choice? We will try our best to be gentle so that you can live to serve the 1,500th person. The guards licked their lips and smiled lewdly. Bella was so frightened by the fate she was about to receive that her face turned pale. Despair appeared in her eyes. It was a fate worse than death. I will be the first person you serve. Since your mouth is wide open, I'll start with that then. Glenn began to unbuckle his pants. Bella was not the only one. Rose, who was beside her, also closed her eyes. Her body trembled. Boom! A muffled sound came through the door at that moment before it was abruptly kicked open. Glenn's advances were halted when the pieces of the broken door flew into the room. Who is it? Are you drunk? How dare you barge into our private room? The 4 guys rushed forward, drawing their daggers from their waists. They were prepared to settle the score with the intruder. They flew out at an even faster speed before they could get close to the entrance. One by one, the daggers in their hands were shattered. They grasped their chests and collapsed on the ground in agony. Each of their chests had a dust-covered footprint, which caused their chests to cave in. The people at the door revealed themselves as the 4 hefty men flew out. They were Watson and Elena, with Watson posing as Casey. Elena's expression changed abruptly when she saw her 2 companions, who were kneeling on the ground with their garments tied up, and Bella's broken jaw. She rushed forward with a water sword in her hand, slicing down at Glenn. Boom! Glenn's body was covered in a coating of sky blue water elemental combat aura, which transformed into armor that could withstand Elena's sword. Then, the man teleported a few meters away. His pupils narrowed slightly as he swept his sight over the 4 hefty men on the ground from the corner of his eyes. Those 4 people were his trusted aides. Each of them possessed the power of a peak silver tier elite. However, when confronted with the individual who had just come through the door, those 4 persons were unable to resist at all. That proved that the person who had just arrived was at least a gold tier elite, and perhaps, not just any gold tier. There are whispers in the floating city that the Ptolemy family's second young master is uneducated and incompetent, and his power is not even at iron tier. Who would have guessed the rumors were false? Young Master Casey, it seems like your true strength is above gold tier. The Ptolemy's might is hidden so deep, indeed. Glenn turned his head to face Watson, who was standing in front of the door, and his eyes narrowed as he asked, "Is it because you have been humiliated in the family and drank a little wine? And that has caused you unable to hide your strength, young Master Casey? However, even if you wanted to unleash your rage, young Master Casey, you should not have chosen me. If you came to the wrong door because you have had too much to drink, I could forget about it if you apologize to me." Grant was not surprised to see Casey's body, which was wrapped in bandages, radiating a gold tier aura because he knew that most of those noble families were wicked. He must have had to shape himself into a useless piece of rubbish so that no one would keep their eyes on him. He must have waited for the most crucial moment before exploding and securing victory in one fell swoop. That kind of event happened all the time in history. As a result, even if everyone in Watergate City said that Casey was a useless piece of trash, he did not agree with them. The aura on Casey's body confirmed his suspicion. He was simply irritated that Casey had interrupted his plans. He was not as noble as Casey, he was only a junior with the severed fingers Gand. However, that did not mean he was afraid of Casey. Elena stepped over to the 2 women as he was talking. First, she assisted Bella in repairing her dislocated jaw. Then she began talking to them in their Sea tribal language. "That despicable human didn't do anything to you, right? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, but Elena, why are you with that man? Is he?" Bella and Rose had been thrilled to see Elena, especially when she freed them from the shackles. However, when they saw her with Casey, they changed their mind. Even though the man's arms were bandaged and his face was swollen, they recognized the man as the Ptolemy family's second young master, who had caught them in the first place. Elena was with that jerk, which meant he might have defiled her. Was that how she regained her freedom? They were sad when they remembered how Elena had sacrificed so much for them and how, despite being saved, they had just gone from one pit of fire to another. Elena quickly wiped the tears on her friends' faces and said, "You have misunderstood. That young man is..." Elena cut herself off mid-sentence because she knew that Watson was impersonating Casey. It would be awkward if she exposed his true identity. In any case, it is not what you think. Let's leave the rest to young Master Casey. Elena stepped out of the room with her 2 friends and locked the door. Only Watson, Glenn, and the 4 men on the ground remained in the room. "I am speaking to you, young Master Casey. How long are you going to ignore me?" Glenn said. Glenn's cheeks were flushed with unrestrained rage when he saw Elena and the other 2 girls exited the room. "Are you the one with the severed fingers gang?" Surprisingly, Casey, who was standing next to him, did not respond to him. Instead, he was intrigued when he noticed the man's missing pinky. After all, he was a man with a severed finger. Who, in the entire Watergate City, was unaware of that? He had met Casey before, but the man acted as if he had just met him. It was odd. Grant, on the other hand, did not give it any thought. He dashed toward Watson, a pair of sky blue combat aura wings spread out from behind him. It appears that you have drunk too much today. Let's get you sobered up. The man had rushed into his room to hurt his subordinates and steal his things. If he did not do anything to deal with that, he would lose his dignity. Casey had hidden his real strength as a gold-tier elite. Plus, he was a wealthy young master, so he must not have been in many fights. How could he defeat Glenn, who had survived hundreds of wars and crawled out of a mound of corpses?